A couple months ago, I made a YouTube short about why pro sim racers mostly don't use VR and choose to use monitors instead, and that caught the attention of Pimax, one of the leading PC VR headset companies. They offered to send me a Pimax crystal of my own to try out and see if these criticisms from pros were valid and how my experience would be coming from a monitor. And a couple weeks later, this right here came in the mail. I mean, come on, don't I look absolutely cool with this? Like, I can't see any of my haters now. Also, the irony is not lost on me that this headset costs more than my sim racing rig combined. It's about $1,500 retail, but besides that, I wanted to provide more of an experience and not really a traditional review on this. Because like I've said in other review-ish type videos, I'm not really a gear guy. I've been racing a budget setup for years and years, and of course I would be biased to the one company that reached out to me and gave me something for free. So instead of a review, this is going to be more of an answering of questions and preconceptions that I had going into trying VR for the first time. So let's start with the initial experience and go from there. There were only a few things that I needed to do to physically assemble this headset, and most of them were made easy by a YouTube video that I found from Pimax about setup. It was basically just plugging cords into one place, making sure that you have the plug for the right country, but other than that, a pretty straightforward process. What was less of a straightforward process was getting all of the software downloaded for SteamVR, for Pimax, and getting the headset calibrated and ready to use in iRacing. Most of the speed bumps that I ran into setting up this headset was just me being inexperienced with VR as a whole, and once I figured out where everything needed to be, everything should have been ready, but I had one major issue with the headset setting it up. For whatever reason, every time I tried to put the headset into 120 Hz mode, it would just disconnect and keep trying to reconnect but then disconnect again over and over as a loop. And this was kind of difficult because I wanted to try this headset to its fullest capabilities. So I actually had a rep at Pimax help me troubleshoot this, and I understand that this won't be the customer experience for everyone, but the fix turned out to be simple. I just plugged one of the headset cords into a new place, bypassing the headset input port for it. I'll show it right here. This fix worked completely, with the only downside being that this cord was a little bit more in the way of my head. But finally, after fumbling around for a couple hours in SteamVR and trying to get everything calibrated right and set up right, I was ready to join iRacing. There was a lot of dumb stuff that I did. It was mostly my fault. I was like, why do I not have sound? It turns out there's a volume button on this, and you have to make sure that it's not all the way down. So that's really funny. But here we go. Oh my gosh. So we were at Iowa in the ARCA car. Whoa. You guys can't see this because it's not 3D, obviously, but the best way I can describe this is it looks almost like real life. Like the car itself, you can tell it's a little unpolished. It almost feels like one of those really fancy birthday cards that you get for somebody where they like, you fold it up and everything pops out. It almost feels like that, but it's still like incredibly realistic. Oh, dude, this is crazy. I'm like scared almost. Where do I even look? So I can look to the left, I can look to the right. Oh my gosh. I don't even see where I'm going in the same way. Might have to mess around with the FOV a little bit because I can kind of only see what's directly in front of me. It's kind of hard for me to see the wall. This really feels like I'm driving a car. Now, I'm probably immensely slower than I usually am right now, obviously. Whoa, no! Oh my gosh, that was kind of scary. I hope I don't sound hyperbolic when I say that VR made iRacing feel like a completely different game. Not just in the experience, but just even the feeling of the tracks. I wasn't able to drive my most comfortable combo in the game, ARCA at Iowa, with any sort of comfort. But while I say that, the absolute immersion of this, having the vision from side to side, having my head be able to track around the car, it was just completely new and completely awesome in the moment. Now, my GPU is just an RTX 3080, which seems to be about the bare minimum I would want for this type of headset. With a single car run, I could easily run it at 120 Hz, but when I was adding other cars to the sessions, it seemed like it would drop to half that pretty often. And here lies the first issue, or I guess preconception, that I had coming into this experience was, what would my comfort level be like physically? Would I have eye strain? Would I have nausea from the motion? And would my neck hurt from the weight of the headset? The Pimax crystal weighs about 1 kilogram or a little bit over 2 pounds for us Americans, but basically this was something that I felt immediately when it was on my head. Felt like a very heavy hat. I know, amazing concept, right? But with that, it did not cause me any pain or issues for at least the first hour, and I would say probably hour and a half it was manageable. After that, I'm not going to claim that I train or work out my neck very much. It was very difficult as time went on, and my head would feel heavier. As I was moving it around, it would feel like more effort just to turn it from side to side. And when I took the headset off, it just felt like a huge weight was lifted off my head, even if it was only a couple pounds. So I think tolerance to that sort of weight on your head is probably something that you have to build your way up to, maybe try to work out a little bit for it. But even for me, a complete beginner with VR, no training or anything with my neck or anything like that, I was comfortable for about an hour. Even though I felt it a little bit, it wasn't a discomfort up until that point. In terms of nausea, this is pretty situational. When I was able to get either 90 or 120 hertz on my VR headset, I felt no nausea. It felt like I was in the VR. I was completely immersed in it. It was like the real world. And because of that, my brain was thinking everything was fine and really no nausea involved. But the couple times where I had my frames cut because of, say, too many cars on the track, too much high graphics, if it went down to below 60, like that 45 hertz mark is where sometimes it landed on, I was getting nauseous almost instantly. Like, it was just too much. Like, you could feel the stutters really bad in VR when it gets to those low frames. So if you have a not so powerful computer, I would not recommend this headset, especially if you're one to get queasy with a low frame rate. And the last type of comfort I was worried about in particular was eye strain. And with the eye strain, it was very similar to the neck strain, right? I was feeling very fine for about an hour, and then reaching that hour and a half mark was when I would start feeling it like, oh, my eyes are having to focus really hard this whole time. And I could compare it to times when I would be on, like, for my job, I'm on the roof of a building during daytime with a white roof and I forget my sunglasses. I would manage it for like an hour, and then after that, I'm like, oh man, my eyes, I wish they could just take a break. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but that's what my comparison to it was. But how those three comfort factors work together, it kind of ends up being the same result. I would really love driving in VR for sprint races, like an ARCA race, where I could start and stop in less than an hour. That would be completely comfortable, but I am not at the point where I could comfortably do like an NIS race or an endurance race yet, but it would have to be something shorter. I think after comfort, the next biggest question I had about VR was, how immersive truly is it? Is it just, I feel like I'm just in a video game kinda, or do I feel like I'm actually driving a car? And with this Pimax crystal, I don't know if it's because of the density of pixels compared to other VR headsets, or because of the field of view compared to other headsets, but I am not going to lie to you, I felt completely immersed while I was in there. Only a few things kind of took me out of it from making me think, wow, I'm actually driving a car. And honestly, most of those things are iRacing's problem. Like, the graphics for the in-car and the ARCA car are not the most up-to-date things in the world for iRacing. Maybe I could have chosen a better car for my first experience, but when you're feeling like in a world, and then that world has kind of low poly textures, that's a very good thing to get you out of there. And that's not the headset's fault, that's just kind of iRacing's deal. The other thing I didn't do initially that I made sure to turn on as soon as I realized was the low latency sound mode. When I would get on the throttle, I wouldn't hear it as soon as I thought I would a lot of the times, and that really messed up a lot of my timings. Once I turned on the low latency mode, it seemed to be a lot better. And finally, the last thing that kind of broke the complete, total, amazing immersion for me was just not being able to see where my buttons are, not having overlays available as visibly. I think that in terms of being fully functional for, say, a pro race where you have to manage a ton of things for in terms of crew chiefing and buttons and all that, this might not be the most competitive option. In terms of actually driving though, I truly believe that VR gives you the most information out of anything that I have tried so far. And I forgot to mention this so far, but yes, for the first time ever, I tried a triple monitor high-end setup, and it was at a rental place that I went to that's in my town. And you might ask, where's the video of that? And the answer is, I got too shy to ask the attendant there to film me driving because I thought it would be weird. So sorry about that, but here are a couple pictures of it. So after trying triple monitors for a very short amount of time and then trying VR for a relatively short amount of time, I can say I picked up the triple monitors a lot quicker than VR. Was I more immersed with triple monitors? Not even close, but I was able to be competitive a lot quicker than in VR. And I think the main reason for this is the default FOV of just being in a car in VR. It's completely different than what we're used to on monitors. And I'd say that from my perspective, at least. I'm very used to having a very zoomed in on my windshield perspective. I can see out it with like all of my vision. Whereas with VR, it's almost like a relatively smaller amount of vision that you have out your window. Even if it's more realistic, it's just kind of scaled down a little bit. But that doesn't mean you're getting less information, it just means it takes more adjusting. So if you ask me, okay, so you have a single monitor setup at home and a VR setup at home. That means you're switching to VR, obviously, right? It's more information, you're gonna be faster. And my answer to that is, unfortunately, I can't. I am just not even close to being at the comfort and speed on my VR headset after, I think it's been about 10 hours now driving it. But with my single monitor, you got to remember, I have thousands of hours just driving on a single monitor. I am completely comfortable with it. So for that reason, I just think that I would have to invest way more hours into VR to get to that point where I can start to overtake the single monitor. So my experience with VR moving forward is not going to be taking it to competitive and trying to go pro with it, like it's unlocked some sort of secret ability with me. I don't think the amount of information that VR provides is that much more to the point where I feel like I'm missing out because I am not using it for competitive racing. What I am going to be using it for is more casual driving, where I want to be immersed. Like driving up and down Mount Washington in iRacing in VR is just surreal. It's one of the coolest things I've ever done in iRacing, especially in the rain. Like that's a complete double whammy. RIP my graphics card, right? In my short, I said that it was harder for people to be consistent to hit their marks in VR because your head's moving around. I don't believe that anymore. Once you are in your car, everything feels all relative. Like it doesn't look like what you're seeing on the screen now when you're in the headset because your eyes know where your head's moving. So in that sense, it's always stable. So you don't have to worry about that. And finally, the last preconception or issue that I had brought up to me a lot after making that short was that pros want to stream. They want to do YouTube videos. And when you have a headset like this, and I put it on, and let's say I'm doing a YouTube video like this. This kind of looks ridiculous, I'm not gonna lie, and at the same time, it's less personal. Even if I see my game, even if I have some sort of overlay for Twitch chat set up or something like that, it's just not as engaging for an audience not to be able to see my face. You just see a headset and I look like a cyborg or something, but this kind of proves the point that this doesn't really work for this type of video. And that's a hard problem to fix because you can make overlays that seamlessly integrate into the VR headset, and that can work for the logistics of it, but at the end of the day, you kind of want to see my eyes. And I mean, you might not want to say, man, I'm going to click off this video if I don't look at DJ Yee-J's eyes. But at the same time, it just becomes less personal. There's psychology to it, all that fun stuff. So the big question is, who is the type of person that would most want to get into a VR headset like the Pimax Crystal? And I think the most common type of person that would want this headset is somebody who just puts pure immersion number one. I'm not saying you can't be fast on the Pimax Crystal, but somebody who is into sim racing already and knows that they want to be as immersed as possible, those will be the ones who would tolerate a slight dip in comfort and performance in the short term in order to just feel that incredible, crisp, clear immersion of VR. I think cars where you are sideways a lot and need to be looking left in exact angles, so dirt racing, off-road racing, those type of racing, I think that VR is a lot more viable competitively there, and you even see that some dirt pros are already mainly on VR headset. And then I think the last type of person who would want to get started in VR is somebody just starting in sim racing, not knowing where to go, but knowing they want to jump right into it. They want to commit. I think if you get a VR headset and just starting out in sim racing, it's going to blow your mind, and you're not going to have to take any of those steps back to keep progressing your speed, because that's where you'll be learning. But ultimately, I believe that is why most pro sim racers don't use VR headsets in their races, because pros probably have been racing for a long time, longer than there have been good available VR headsets for sim racing. And because of that, they have built a comfort on another type of visual system like the triple monitors, where if they move to VR, it would be a step back in performance for little to no ceiling raise. But let me know what you think about iRacing in VR before. Have you tried any VR headsets for sim racing? What did you think about them? What are some of the concerns that you had with VR, and what were some of the things that maybe impressed you? But anyways, thank you all for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all on the track.